Okay, you're live on air now.
Awesome. Hi there. My name is Stephen Lynch. I'm a district captain with Sister District Project 12. Very thankful for all the folks who could join us today, including district captains from DC, New Jersey, and really all over the country. Very excited to introduce House of Delegates District 50 Captain for the Commonwealth of Virginia, Lee Carter. Lee, thank you so much for joining us and spending some time with us this morning on your Sunday here.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much for all the hard work you've been doing.
We're very proud to be supporting your campaign. So for the folks on the stream and for the folks who may be watching this later, this is a interview that Lee Carter, as one of that Sister District Project is supporting. He agreed to talk to us a little bit about himself, his campaign, and about ways that folks can help, folks who are really concerned about what's happening in Washington these days, folks who are concerned about the political process and the change in their country. So Lee, to start off with, there are lots of folks who have read a lot about your campaign, a lot about what's happening in Virginia and nationally, who may not be as informed yet. Could you tell us a little about yourself, sort of who you are, what you're doing, where your campaign's taking place, since we have a sort of folks from around the nation?
Sure. So I am a 5-year veteran of the United States Marine Corps. I deployed twice, including once to Haiti after the earthquake in 2010. Then when I got out of the Marine Corps, I moved to the DC area for work, fixing cancer therapy equipment. And I'm now an IT consultant. And I was motivated to run in large part by a workplace injury. So I had to deal firsthand with the Virginia Workers' Compensation System, and all these systems that are designed to protect people when they're most vulnerable. And the experience that I had with the Workers' Compensation System was so abysmal that when I was able to walk again, I decided I'm not just going to walk, I'm going to run for something and I'm going to fix this. And the office that I'm running for is, like you said, the 50th district for the Virginia House of Delegates. This is the lower half of Virginia's state legislature, and my district encompasses about 85,000 people in the city of Manassas and some of western Prince William County. Now, this is a district that went to Hillary Clinton by about 12.5 points in November, but despite that, the current incumbent is actually a member of Republican Party leadership. He's the majority whip, so third in command of House Republicans here in Virginia. So this is one of those districts where we have a tremendous opportunity to shift all of Virginia's politics a little bit away from the hard right, just by replacing one vulnerable member.
That's a great summary. Thanks so much. I mean, can you talk a little bit about, there's a lot to go there. Can you talk first about, what made you decide to run? You obviously had a very personal experience there, and you can go into that as much as you'd like to, but also, I know there's an array of issues that you're very concerned about. Talk a little bit more about those.
Sure. Without going into too much detail, because it's a very, very long story. Basically, I got shocked at work. There was a miswired electrical control panel, and I got shocked in one hand and out the other, and blew my back out pulling away from that panel. And like I said, I had to deal with the Virginia Workers' Compensation Commission. They mandated which doctor I could go to, and that doctor just tried to give me pills and a bill. And then, I had to pay out of pocket for a second opinion. And the doctor that I actually paid out of pocket for found the problem and got me back up and moving again. But then when I got back to work, I called up my employer. I said, hey, I'm ready to go. I'm ready to get back to work. And they said, we have work, but we don't have work for you. So, these are the sorts of things that really can happen to anyone who works for a living. Folks who work in the construction industry, they hear all the time this phrase, if you fall off a ladder, you're fired before you hit the ground. And it just goes to show that even if you have what you think is a stable financial position in life, one accident or one injury or one illness can really lead to disaster unless those systems that we put in place to protect people when they're most vulnerable are shored up and sort of restored to the effectiveness that we saw in them maybe 30, 40 years ago.
And it seems like one of the things that's been happening across the board, just to expand on that point a little bit, is that a lot of those systems have been eroded for everyday people. Isn't that right?
Yeah, absolutely. And these are things that for a lot of people, they don't necessarily seem like they'll have that big of an impact. A lot of people go about their lives and think it can never happen to me. And then all of a sudden it does happen to you. And you realize that the things that have happened behind the scenes in Richmond or in the capital of whatever state you live in for the last 30 or 40 years really do have an impact on your life. And they have that impact when you need those systems to work for you the most.
You mentioned Richmond. We've heard of, sort of outside of Virginia, we've heard a bit about Manassas City, Prince William County. Can you share with us a little bit about your district, about what the concerns or the voters are there?
Sure. Yeah. My district is sort of in the exurbs of Washington, D.C. It's about a 45-minute drive from Washington, D.C., although depending on traffic, that could go up to almost 3 hours sometimes. But we've got about 85,000 people here, split basically 50-50 between the city of Manassas and Prince William County. And my district just looks like Virginia in miniature. So we've got a little bit of everything. We've got a lot of folks who work in blue-collar construction industry jobs that live in the city of Manassas because it's where the affordable housing is in the D.C. area. We've also got some sort of old money Virginia, folks who have been here for 10, 12, 15 generations, as well as countless thousands of young professionals who are moving to the area just to get their first taste of the white picket fence life. So economically, this area is extraordinarily representative of all of Virginia. And, that really presents a great opportunity to show that an economic message of a government that works for all of us here in Virginia can really be effective at getting people motivated, getting people inspired, and thinking that, there are people in politics who actually want to make my life better, which is what you need to do to get people to the polls.
Excellent. And what are some other things that we can do? Well, I guess sort of specifically for those of us who are outside of your district, folks in Sister District Project, other just concerned folks across the country. What are some other things we can do to help people to be involved in politics more in that district and help with your campaign specifically? Can you give us some ideas about the sort of things we can help out with maybe?
Yeah, so one of the big challenges here in Virginia is the fact that Virginia has no limits on political contributions. So any politician in Virginia can receive an unlimited amount of money from any source as long as it's not foreign. So what we see is the biggest political contributor here in Virginia is actually one of the power companies, Dominion Power. And they write checks of $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 at a time, mostly to incumbents. So, the political scene here in Virginia is really carried by this inertia that we've built up by our lax campaign finance system that allows the corporations with the deepest pockets to preserve the status quo despite thousands or millions of people here in Virginia who are desperate for a change. So one of the things that folks in Sister District can do to help is by signing up to volunteer with the campaign. We've got until November before people actually go to the polls. So a little bit further down the road, we're going to have a lot of phone banks. So we can have folks from all across the country calling residents of this district and letting them know that there is a candidate, there is a real choice on the ballot for an economic future, for an alternative vision of a Virginia where everybody can work and live. On top of that, we can also have fundraisers. I know CA12 just recently had a happy hour fundraiser, which was tremendously successful. Also, some of the Sister District DC folks had a fundraiser that was also tremendously successful. That one I actually got to go to because it was about 45 minutes away from here.
Nice.
But there are a lot of ways that folks can help.
Excellent, excellent, great. I mean, and so one of the things that we were looking to do is get some support for from the Democratic Party for your campaign. I know that's been an issue sort of nationally with races that people have been tracking. How can we help? Those of us again, in Sister District and elsewhere. How can we help a party to support you more fully through whatever mechanisms they have to do so?
Well, one of the challenges that we've got here is the Democratic Party of Virginia historically has only had 8 to 12 candidates challenging incumbent Republicans at any given time. Well, this year we have something like 120 candidates running for 100 seats. So the infrastructure here in Virginia is really sort of stretched. It's not. I don't think it's any sort of malice or neglect that's causing some of these races to go a little bit under the radar. It's just purely lack of resources, lack of infrastructure. So the biggest thing that we can do to make sure that the Democratic Party of Virginia helps out is showing a really strong challenge to the incumbent. When polling data comes out later in the summer, if they see that we're close, then they're going to be knocking at my door saying, how can we help push you over the edge? That's really going to be the thing that does it, is building up this organization, building up this infrastructure in my campaign that will get my name out there, will get people familiar with my message, get people excited about my message, so that we can show that this is a race that can be won.
Gotcha. And given, sort of the history of fundraising in Virginia and elsewhere, one of the things that was really striking about your personal message, Lee, was the fact that you're taking money from large corporations, and that sort of thing.
Not one dime from for-profit corporations or industry interest groups. That's really one of the things that I think is going to lead people to the idea that they can trust government again, is once we start having representatives in government that are truly working for them. If you see someone getting donations from Sierra Club, you know what that money's for, right? It's for environmental causes. But if you see someone getting money from Dominion Power, you don't know what Dominion Power wants. It could be, they want permits to dump coal ash into the river. It could be they want an ease on carbon caps. It could be that they want laxer workplace safety standards. You just don't know until the person actually gets down there to Richmond and votes. But if you get someone in Richmond whose campaign is funded by people and by progressive interest groups, then you know exactly what that person is going to go down there and do.
Gotcha. Yeah, definitely. And so, given that you are running a truly grassroots supported campaign, what's the overall fundraising goal that you have, or that your campaign manager has set? What's enough? What's the biggest foreseeable expenses that you have coming up? Oh, and by the way, I'm asking a bunch of questions here that people submit ahead of time. We're also going to have a few people on the stream who will be submitting questions in the last 30 minutes or so.
Sure thing. So, yeah, to your question, this is one of those things. The message is free, but delivering it is not. So what we've seen here in Virginia politics recently is that you don't need to outraise your opponent. You just need to raise enough to get your message out there. And enough for my race is probably in the neighborhood of $200,000 to $250,000. And we're making great progress towards getting to that goal. But obviously, if you're trying to raise $250,000, it's never going to be easy. So we do need all the help that we can get to get our message out there. The biggest expenses that we've got coming up is polling. Polling is actually way more expensive than people think. It costs for a baseline poll somewhere around $15,000 to $17,000 for a district this size, which can come as a bit of a shock to a lot of people.
Okay.
But polling is what it takes to show the Democratic Party of Virginia that you're serious. You need that polling data to show that you're 2 points off, 4 points off, whatever, before they really sort of perk up and take an interest in your race.
Mhm.
Other than that, the biggest expenses are going to be staff and mailing. Everybody's gotten those mailers in their mailbox, and they look at it for 10 seconds and then they throw it away. But that is still the most effective for the dollar means of contacting a large number of people, because you do have that 10 seconds between the mailbox and the trash where they're actually looking at it. And counterintuitive as it
Wow,
might
yeah.
seem,
And are there anything else? Now that's a great summary of sort of how, I guess, for folks who are wondering, what fundraising goes into. Are there any other on the timeline of your campaign or events that you anticipate happening, or even other things that we should be on the lookout? You mentioned phone banking before as well, where folks could get involved either financially at certain points in your campaign to help you when you need it most, or separate from fundraising, other ways that people might be able to volunteer that haven't been mentioned so far.
Yeah, absolutely. So anybody that's near the DC metro area can come out and knock on doors and have conversations with people here in the city of Manassas and Prince William County. Anybody who's not near the DC metro area, we can find ways to make your skills valuable. If you're a graphic designer, we're always looking for things that we can share on social media that can get our point across. Or, if you make videos or what have you. If you have a skill and you want to contribute to this race, we can find a way to put it to good use.
Great, good to know. I know there's several folks from the DC area Sister District Project Group. So, and one of them, I believe, Michael Cohorst, has a question actually for us, germane to the conversation. He says, Lee, are you concerned that not taking corporate money would put you at a serious disadvantage? Is that something you were concerned about either before your campaign, or how are your thoughts on that now?
That is sort of the conventional wisdom, but this is 2017 where the conventional wisdom doesn't really seem to apply anymore. So what I've seen through this campaign is actually that not taking corporate money really does build that trust in people. Even people who disagree with me on the issues, they see that I'm not taking corporate money, and they know that my votes down in Richmond are going to be motivated solely by whether or not it's going to help people. And the corporate donors in Virginia are really interested in not changing things, not rocking the boat. So they contribute mostly to incumbents, because incumbents are largely predictable. So as a challenger, there wasn't really going to be a whole lot of corporate money coming my way anyway. I have returned a little bit, but not much. But to be perfectly honest, I've actually raised more off of the promise to not take corporate money than I've had to return from corporations who have tried to give to me. So it's working out sort of on all fronts.
It's great to hear. That's definitely great to hear. And what are some of the other things that sort of have been surprising or inspiring since you've started running? You mentioned the grassroots thing, which I think everyone probably on the call would agree is prefer as our ideal, but it's good to hear that you're getting some mileage out of it. What are some other things that you think are showing you that your race has momentum, and that you think you have a good shot at winning this year's election?
The biggest thing that's been surprising and inspiring to me is when I'm going out and knocking on doors and talking to people, I've gone up driveways where there's a Trump sticker on the car and knocked on the door and said, "Hi, my name's Lee Carter. I'm a candidate for the Virginia House of Delegates. I'd like to talk with you about the issues that matter in your life." And, these hardcore Republicans will sit there and have a conversation with me, and they'll tell me the issues that they're focused on. And at the end of the conversation, I'll ask them whether or not they think they can support me, and they'll, they'll sit back for a second and they'll think, and they'll say, "You know what? You're at my doorstep, and the other guy's never been. So, sure, I'll, sign the petition to get you on the ballot, or, I'll take your business card and give you a call, or what have you." So that's really been the most inspiring thing, is just seeing the reaction that people have when you go and talk to them about what's happening in their life, regardless of partisan labels. That is the biggest thing to people, is having a conversation with someone who's going to listen and who they think is going to work on the issues that matter to them.
Definitely. And what are some of these, and this is, sort of getting at the heart probably of politics these days, what are some of the issues that are at the hearts of all the voters that you're talking to in your district? What are some of the things that come up regardless of whose sticker is on someone's door?
It goes back to that phrase from the Bill Clinton campaign in '92, "It's the economy, stupid." It's really at the heart of politics, is how well people are doing on these kitchen table issues. Because at the end of the day, regardless of partisan labels, everybody wants the same thing. They want to go to work, they want a good school for their kids, they want to be able to pay the bills, and they don't want to sit in traffic for 4 hours every day. So, if you talk to people about those issues, about those economic issues that have the biggest tangible impact on their life, whether or not they can see a doctor when they need to, whether or not they're able to pay the bills, whether or not they're able to come out of college without $80,000 in student loan debt, those sorts of things, people are really willing to drop the partisan labels that they've put on themselves and just think about whether or not your policies are going to benefit them.
Gotcha. And on that sort of like personal note, could you tell us a little bit about your own relationship with Virginia? Read your campaign profile, but sort of how did you end up where you are today after the Marine Corps? And by the way, Lee, thank you very much for your service.
I'm sorry, say that last part again.
I'm sorry. Thank you very much for your service, by the way.
Yeah, so I grew up in a little town in North Carolina called Elizabeth City, which for anyone who's been to the Outer Banks, they've driven past it, but not stopped. But it's a cross-border suburb of Norfolk, Virginia. So, about half the town where I grew up are folks who commuted to work in Chesapeake, Norfolk, Virginia Beach, those areas. So even though I grew up in North Carolina, culturally, it was very much a part of Virginia, sort of an extended part of Virginia. So, when I was 18, I joined the Marine Corps. I spent 5 years on active duty. And then when I got out of the Marine Corps, I moved up here for work fixing cancer therapy equipment. And I think I'm probably about the only person to move to the DC area after they get out of the military. But I really just fell in love with the place, especially out here in Manassas. So this is where my social circle has been for the last 5-6 years. The church that I go to has been out here. So about 2.5 years ago, when I was coming up to the end of the lease that I had on a place in Alexandria, I thought, all right, where am I going to go? Manassas, right? Where all my friends are, where all my life is. And then once I got out here, I realized that running for this office was going to be the opportunity for me to have a big impact on the lives of 8.5 million people who call themselves Virginians.
Definitely. And Lee, do you plan to focus, a great question from the stream here that I think goes back to that point about the kitchen table issues, but also the proximity to DC that you have there. Do you plan to focus mostly on kitchen table issues during your campaign. Some people are also wondering, do you plan to frame your campaign as a referendum against Trump? These aren't mutually exclusive necessarily, but just wondering, sort of how you feel about that and what you think is the right thing to do right now.
Yeah, I mean, Donald Trump is the elephant in the room, right? Every conversation about politics, regardless of party, has this subtext of Donald Trump to it. So I don't feel the need to speak about him directly very often because he is always on everybody's minds. And one of the things that we've seen is we've seen precedent for a president like Donald Trump, although it wasn't here in America. It was actually in Italy with a guy named Silvio Berlusconi. And Berlusconi's opposition for years kept hammering away at how terrible Berlusconi is, how corrupt Berlusconi is. And Berlusconi kept winning election year after year after year because the conversation was about Berlusconi. So the way they finally got rid of Silvio Berlusconi was to ignore him and to put forward an alternative vision for what Italy should look like. And when the opposition parties in Italy did that, that's how they finally beat him. So that's the lesson that I'm trying to draw from history on what to do when we have government leadership that is so off the rails. Is to really just focus on what the alternative is. So I'm going out there and I'm talking about my message. And yeah, people ask me about Donald Trump all the time. It's unavoidable. But whenever they do, I always say, look at the priorities for what's going on in Washington. Look at what they're doing. They're trying to cut education. They're trying to cut healthcare. They're trying to re-legalize discrimination. What we're going to do here in Virginia is we're going to set up Virginia's government to protect the 8.5 million folks that we have here. Because if Virginia has the political courage to stand up and say, not only are you not going to cut healthcare for these 8.5 million people, we're going to expand it. Not only are you not going to allow employers to discriminate against people here in Virginia based on their religion, we're also going to expand non-discrimination coverage to gender identity and sexual orientation. If you put forward that alternative for what the state government can do to protect people, regardless of what the federal government's doing, they get the idea. That you're addressing the elephant in the room without actually directly talking about it.
Gotcha. And speaking about elephants in the room, we also have a question on here about your opponent. I don't know, as you mentioned previously, I don't know how much you want to spend talking about your opponent, but so I'll give you the option. What we're wondering, what's Jackson Miller's platform, and or what is the Virginia government doing now that you think is sufficient to protect, the citizens of the Commonwealth? To your point about things that the state can do. Interested in your thoughts in general on sort of how the job's been done so far, I guess.
Yeah, he's been down there for 10 years. And when he wins re-election, he typically wins it with about 7,500 votes. That's not the margin, that's the total. And this is in a district with 85,000 people. So he's down there really by inertia, just based on the fact that Virginia's elections are in odd-numbered years where turnout is low. But we really haven't seen a lot of results coming out of his time down there. As a member of Republican Party leadership, there's really no excuse for him to not be able to pass bills, right? He's been in leadership through times when the Republicans had a supermajority in the House, when they had a majority in the Senate, and when they had a Republican governor. So the fact that life didn't get appreciably better for the majority of people here in the 50th district really just goes to show that despite his best efforts, his policies aren't going to be what does it for folks here. And that's the message that I'm taking. That's the message that I'm delivering to people is that there's an alternative that can make your life better. Take stock of what's happened to you over the last 10 years and think about whether or not the current incumbent has made your life better, or has made it worse, or just done nothing at all. And weigh those two options there. So
Definitely. And what's the main difference between your two campaigns? You mentioned the fundraising issue previously and sort of the state of that. Could you talk to us sort of about the difference, like broad strokes about the two of your campaigns so far?
Yeah. So when I declared, he actually had about $305,000 cash on hand, and he obviously has been fundraising during that time. I declared this race back in February of last year, back when we were worried about what a Jeb Bush presidency might look like, if you remember back that far. So this whole time, I've been forced to sort of think outside the box. I know that money isn't going to be the sole determining factor here. It's not going to be a conventional race where I can just spend more money and get my face in front of voters more, and win that way. So we've really become experts at making a little bit of money go a long way. We're a very volunteer-driven campaign. We're very much focused on going out and having conversations with people face to face, because that is free, and it's actually what's most effective. So that's really the largest strategic difference between our two campaigns. Is he's going to spend a lot of money on advertising. He's definitely going to spend more money than me. But we've actually seen that money can't buy elections here in Prince William County and Manassas. And we actually saw that because my opponent decided he was going to run two campaigns at the same time earlier this year. So he tried to run a special election for clerk of the court in Prince William County. And it was a 52-day race. They set it for the shortest possible calendar they could because they knew that he had a ton of cash on hand and that any challenger he would have wouldn't have that. But our candidate was a very good friend of mine. Her name's Jackie Smith. Jackson went out there and spent almost $250,000 on paid canvassers and advertisements and mailers. And Jackie Smith spent 40 grand. And we had a huge volunteer effort from all corners of the county. Almost all of the Democratic Party's House of Delegates campaigns dropped what they were doing and lended their infrastructure to Jackie Smith's effort. And we were able to beat him by 8 points, despite being outspent 6 or 7 to 1. So money doesn't buy these elections. So you don't need to spend more than your opponent. You just need to spend enough to get your face out there.
Very reassured. Hearing that money does not buy elections in the United States of America is a very reassuring thing, or at least in the Commonwealth of Virginia.
But you need people to get involved. You need people that are fired up, that are going to go out there and talk to hundreds of other people, because that's the only way that you're going to counteract the influence of money in politics.
Gotcha. On that point, some folks at Sister District actually sent over a campaign support proposal. I'm not sure if you've had a chance to run through that. Just generally speaking, if you've had any feedback on things that Sister District specifically has suggested as in ways you could help your campaign over the long term.
The biggest thing is just getting people involved. There are a lot of different ideas that are coming out of the various Sister District groups, and I love them all. All of these ideas that folks are putting forward, we'll give them a shot and see what works, and the ones that work, we'll do them again and again and again.
Okay, sounds good. There are a lot of us, so we can definitely help out with that. One quick question from Caroline Nassif in CA12. Handwritten postcards as part of a Get Out the Vote effort on your behalf. She was wondering if you have van data for Democrats in your district. And before you answer that, Lee, folks on the stream, please do submit your questions. We are sort of the ended prepared questions here.
Yes, absolutely. I love the idea of handwritten postcards. Um, it's really one of those things. A lot of people are inundated with political mail, especially here in Virginia, where there's no such thing as a year without an election. So, like I said earlier, with standard political mail, you get about 10 seconds in front of that person's face. But um, think back to when the last time was that you got a handwritten postcard from anybody. For me, it was probably 2002, 2003. So if somebody sees a handwritten postcard in their mailbox, they're going to spend a lot more time looking at it, reading it, digesting the information that's in there. So if we can get folks having postcard parties, handwriting these postcards to folks in the district, just letting them know of the importance of local and state elections on their day-to-day lives, that will have a tremendous impact. And one handwritten postcard is going to have a much bigger impact than 4, 5, or 6 conventional mailers. So I absolutely love that idea. And anyone who wants to organize postcard parties, I am all for it. We can start doing them now. We can get that van data to folks who want to go ahead and start writing now, and then we'll get them written, get them addressed, and then put them in the mail sometime in October.
Excellent. So I assume that, I guess a follow-up question from someone who's very enthusiastic about postcard writing, about how we get addresses. I don't know if you have that on hand, or I assume we should work with we should contact your campaign to get that information.
Yeah. So the best way to get in contact with us is actually to send an email to either me or my campaign manager. So my email address is lee@carterforvirginia.com. His is dylan@carterforvirginia.com. And it's DYLAN. If you send it to me, then I'll forward it to him, and we'll definitely get the information that folks need out to them.
Awesome. It's great to hear that the biggest difference maker in this election will be people showing up and exercising their right to vote. It's something that's overlooked, sort of too much, I think. So more about the way you've served this country before. There have been a few people who are wondering if you wanted to share some additional color on your time in the Marine Corps, listed, where did you serve, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I grew up in a military family. My father served 4 years in the Navy and then 17 in the Coast Guard before he retired. And I don't know if anyone who's listening remembers what the military was like before 9/11. But that was back in the day when enlisted personnel would get to a new duty station and they would do the paperwork to check in, and the first thing they'd be given is instructions on how to sign up for food stamps. So, the military for me was sort of an escape ladder out of a poor life. After my father retired from the Coast Guard, we struggled for quite a while. So that was really the biggest driver on me joining the Marine Corps. Was the fact that when I was 18, I was working at a bookstore and I was making about enough money to put gas in the car to get back to work. After a few months of that, I decided I had to go ahead and do something with my life. And I asked my dad, what branch of the military should I join? And him being a Navy and Coast Guard guy, he said, I don't care, just not the Marine Corps. And me being 18, you can't tell an 18-year-old don't join the Marine Corps because he's going to do it. That was the main driving force behind joining the Marine Corps, was really getting that ladder to a stable life. And it works. When you're on active duty, there are certain things that are guaranteed. You work hard and you're going to get enough money to put food on the table. You're going to have a roof over your head. going to have healthcare that you can use at no cost. And those things really showed me what life should be like for working people. And then, obviously I got out of the Marine Corps and went to work in the private sector, and I saw what life is really like for working people. And the difference between those two was sort of unconscionable to me. So that's why I decided to run.
Yeah. And since we're not sort of a different tone but similar sort of question, what's your time? How do you spend your time? What do you like to do for fun? I'm not sure if we have some bakers in the audience. There's some questions about like, what's your favorite dessert? You could tell us a little bit about yourself, just in general, on the personal side.
Yeah. We had a question about free time there, and I don't really remember what that's like. So yeah, the biggest thing that I do with my time is what you see here. It's running for office, it's talking to people. Campaigning here in Virginia means that calling people and asking for money is a full-time job, and going out and talking to voters is another full-time job, and going to events to make sure that people see that you're active in the community is another full-time job. So if you're running for office here in Virginia, you really need to be prepared to spend 80, 90 hours a week on it, and that doesn't leave a whole lot of time for a whole lot else. But before I decided to run for office, politics was a hobby. I treated it like a spectator sport. I would argue with people online a lot, which really got me used to talking about the issues in a very candid way. But that was the biggest thing. Although I did enjoy hiking, I really wish I could get back to it because the campaign life leads to a lot of cheeseburgers and pizza and a lot of buying new pants. But yeah, that was really the thing. Was politics was always my hobby, and now it's my life.
Excellent. And and just a note for the folks on the stream, please do continue to submit your questions. Lee, we got a question. With all of the time that you're spending, obviously, on the campaign, and the fact that we do have some volunteers who are in the general area around your district, when would it be best? We're sending boots for Virginia is the note I got. When would it be best for folks to show up to help with canvassing, contact your campaign about volunteering for canvassing, et cetera, et cetera?
Evenings and weekends are really the best time for going out there and contacting voters. Anybody who's interested in knocking on doors, this district is ideal for it. It's about half townhouses. So it's a very compact district. A lot of folks live really close to one another. So you can go and knock on, 60, 70 doors an hour, which is a lot better than a lot of other districts. But it's really evenings and weekends, just anytime that people are home. So anybody who wants to come on out on, a Wednesday evening, they're more than welcome to. We can definitely put them to work then. But the big canvas drives that we're going to have, where we get 8, 10, 12 people together in the office and then send them all out at once, those are mostly going to be on the weekends.
Gotcha. And is that happening closer to the election in October, or is that going to be happening throughout the year?
So we've already started, but the time of the year determines who we talk to. So right now it's going to be a lot of trying to identify what people believe in, a lot of trying to fill in the gaps in the data that we have, and then a little bit further down the road, it's going to be just trying to knock on as many identified supporters as possible and get them to go out to the polls. So, if you want to come out and volunteer now, then please feel free to. There doors to be knocked on and conversations to be had right now. And the only thing that's going to change is how many doors we need to knock on. So come on down.
Excellent. Yeah, there's so much enthusiasm, especially about grassroots politics here in America right now. It's great to hear that there's a way that people can get involved.
Absolutely.
Excellent. And so I think we're about at the end of here and almost the end of our questions. So we were wondering, Lee. First off, there's one more question. Are there some milestones in your campaign? So are there specific sort of phases of your campaign, the way you're thinking about it? Because we mentioned, postcards being sent out in October, maybe having canvassing throughout the year in like sort of different phases. How do you see the campaign shaping up over time, and what are the touch points where volunteers can get involved, and where it's sort of most important for your campaign that they do get involved?
Well, this campaign is really a lot simpler than a lot of people give campaigns. A lot of people think that campaigns are what they see on the West Wing or on House of Cards, but really it's just about going out and talking to people. So, there are different phases based on what conversations we're having, but as far as what we're doing, it's not going to change a whole lot between now and November, just like it hasn't changed a whole lot between last February and now. It's just talking to as many people as possible, as many times as possible. So a campaign is really one big phase on that front. But like I said, the actual content of the conversation does change. So if people want to get involved now, then by all means, support early has a multiplying effect. It really sort of it works like a snowball rolling downhill. A little bit of extra support early on leads to a whole lot of extra support later on down the road. So I would encourage people to not wait, to go ahead and get involved now, and make sure that you have the biggest impact that you possibly can.
Oh, that's great. Thank you so much, Lee, for being so accessible and for taking the time to talk to us today. We have one final question to close out the video today. But first off, I just want to thank you on behalf of everyone who's joining from around the country and the folks who'll be watching this later. Thank you so much for your time. So the final question, Lee, is, imagine you've been elected. What could people expect from Lee Carter in the Virginia House of Delegates?
So the thing that people can expect from me in the Virginia House of Delegates is that every vote that I take and every bill that I put forward will be motivated by the answer to one question, and that is, will this help people? If it will, then I'll fight for it. If it won't, then I'll fight against it. That's really all there is to it. One party doesn't have a monopoly on good ideas. So if I see a good bill coming out of a Republican member of the House of Delegates, then I'll work with them on that. But the biggest thing is going to be whether or not it's going to help people. So it's going to be about building a Virginia that makes sure that everyone can go to work and pay the bills, making sure that everyone has a good school to put their kids in, making sure that everyone is free from discrimination regardless of how they were born or who they love. It's going to be about making sure that Virginia works for all of us, all 8.5 million.
That's truly inspiring words. Thank you so much, Lee. Well, that wraps up our video for today. Thank you for everyone who's taken the time to watch this live, and for all the folks who will be watching it on the video on demand later. You heard it from Lee himself. There are lots of opportunities to get involved, and a little bit of fundraising can go a long way in terms of making right in Virginia and as part of a grassroots movement across the country. So thank you so much to everyone. Us up for today.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, Lee. Take care.